You are using the most powerful technology ever invented right now, and you don't even realize it. Not your phone, not the internet. Language. The ability to take an invisible thought inside your skull and transfer it perfectly into someone else's brain using nothing but vibrations in the air. Right now, pressure waves are entering your ear canal, bending tiny hair cells, and somehow, your brain is converting those vibrations into meaning, into images, into ideas that never existed in the physical world until this moment. Every civilization, every religion, every scientific breakthrough, every love story ever told, all of it was built on this single invention. And here is the terrifying part. We have absolutely no idea how it started. The origin of language has been called the hardest problem in science. In 1866, the Linguistic Society of Paris went so far as to ban all papers on the subject, declaring the question unanswerable. And in many ways, they were right, because language has left us almost nothing to work with. Stone tools survive for millions of years. Bones can be dated and measured. But words vanish the instant they leave your lips. They don't fossilize. There are no ancient recordings. The greatest invention in human history left behind no physical trace of its own birth. So scientists have been forced to become detectives, piecing together clues from bones, genes, and the brains of living primates to reconstruct something that disappeared before history even began. And the first thing those detectives discovered is that they cannot agree on anything. The debate over when language appeared has split the scientific world into two camps, and they could not be further apart. On one side stands Noam Chomsky, perhaps the most influential linguist of the 20th century. Chomsky argues that language appeared suddenly, roughly 100,000 years ago, as the result of a single genetic mutation. One random rewiring of the brain passed that person's offspring, and within a few generations, an entire species could speak. It was not gradual. It was not slow. It was a lightning strike. On the other side stands Michael Tomasello and a growing number of evolutionary biologists who find this idea almost absurd. They argue that language evolved gradually over millions of years, beginning with simple vocalizations and gestures in our earliest ancestors, slowly building in complexity through natural selection. For them, language was not a miracle. It was a long, slow climb.
So who is right? The bones offer some clues. Deep inside your throat sits a tiny horseshoe-shaped bone called the hyoid. It is the only bone in the entire human body that is not connected to any other bone. It floats, suspended by muscles and ligaments, and it is critical for producing the precise movements of the tongue and larynx that make speech possible. In 1989, archaeologists excavating Kebara Cave in Israel made a stunning discovery: a Neanderthal skeleton dating back roughly 60,000 years with a perfectly preserved hyoid bone. And it was virtually identical to ours. This meant that Neanderthals, at least anatomically, had the physical equipment for speech. The hardware was there. But did they have the software? That question got a dramatic answer in 2001 when geneticists identified a gene called FOXP2. They found it by studying a single British family known in the scientific literature only as the KE family. Across 3 generations, half the members of this family carried a mutation in the FOXP2 gene, and they all suffered from severe speech and language disorders. They could not coordinate the complex facial movements required for speech. They struggled with grammar, with forming sentences, with the fundamental architecture of language itself. When researchers sequenced Neanderthal DNA, they found something remarkable. Neanderthals carried the same version of FOXP2 that we do. Whatever this gene does, and it does far more than we initially thought, it was already in place long before modern humans walked out of Africa. But genes and bones only tell part of the story. How did language begin? What were the first words? One of the most compelling theories came from neuroscientist Michael Tomasello, who argued that language did not begin with the voice at all. It began with the hands. Tomasello pointed out that our closest relatives, chimpanzees and gorillas, communicate far more effectively with gestures than with vocalizations.
Their calls are largely emotional and involuntary, screams of fear, grunts of pleasure, but their gestures are deliberate, flexible, and learned. Corballis proposed that early hominins communicated primarily through hand gestures for millions of years, and that language only shifted to the voice when our ancestors began making and using tools. Their hands were suddenly occupied. The mouth became the next available channel.
This idea gained unexpected support from a discovery made in a laboratory in Parma, Italy in the early 1990s. Neuroscientist Giacomo Rizzolotti and his team were studying the brains of macaque monkeys when they noticed something strange. Certain neurons in the monkey's premotor cortex fired not only when the monkey performed an action, like grasping a peanut, but also when the monkey simply watched someone else perform the same action. Rizzolotti called them mirror neurons. These cells create an internal simulation of another being's actions, a neural bridge between self and other. Many researchers believe mirror neurons provided the cognitive foundation for language, the ability to understand another person's intentions, to recognize that a sound carries meaning, to step inside another mind. But why would our ancestors need such a complex system in the first place? Anthropologist Robin Dunbar offered an answer that is as elegant as it is surprising. Dunbar studied the relationship between brain size and social group size across primate species and found a consistent pattern. The larger the neocortex, the larger the social group. When he extrapolated this to humans, he arrived at a number that has since become famous, roughly 150. Dunbar's number, the maximum number of meaningful social relationships a human brain can maintain. In smaller primate groups, social bonds are maintained through physical grooming, picking through fur, removing parasites. But as human groups grew beyond what grooming could sustain, Dunbar argued, language evolved as a form of vocal grooming. And what did early humans talk about? Each other. Gossip. Who is trustworthy? Who cheated? Who is sleeping with whom? Language, in this view, evolved not for poetry or philosophy, but for survival-critical social information. And yet, even gossip does not capture what truly makes human language unique. Linguists point to one feature that separates our communication from every other system in the animal kingdom: recursion, the ability to embed a thought within a thought within a thought. A bee can communicate the location of flowers. A monkey can scream a warning about a predator. But only a human can say, "The man who saw the woman who wore the red dress that was made in the factory that burned down last Tuesday told me he was sorry." Finite elements, infinite combinations. Recursion gives human language boundless creative power, and no other species on Earth has ever demonstrated anything like it. After decades of research, after studying bones and genes and neurons and ancient caves, the honest answer is this: we still do not know how language began. We do not know if it was a sudden spark or a slow burn. We do not know if the first word was spoken or signed. The origin of language remains the greatest unsolved mystery about what makes us human. But we do know one thing. Once it existed, it changed everything. And if you watched our last video on what ancient humans did after dark, you already know where that change was sharpened and refined. Around the fire. Night after night, for hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors sat in flickering circles of light and did the one thing no other creature on Earth could do. They told stories. And in doing so, they became us.